Okay.
And you should see a list of the 2 slides that you submitted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
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 I'm going to take
you.
back control, but you're all set for when your turn comes up. I'll give you control and then you can share then. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's 2:30 and let us get going with ADD at IETF 124. This is the Adaptive DNS Discovery Working Group. If you're here for the ADD support meeting, you're in the wrong room. Humor. This is an official IETF meeting. You should be aware of the note well and all the elements and BCPs you are agreeing to. You should be aware of this for participation in the IETF. So please read it and be familiar with the note well. For meeting tips, if you're, this is Wednesday, so you should be familiar with this, but I'll say, please register with the QR code or log in using the on-site tool if you're on site, so that we get an accurate head count of the number of people that are participating in the room. This is how we select rooms for future meetings. And if we don't have enough people saying we're here for ADD, it doesn't get recorded and then we don't get a room. So please log in and have your attendance counted. These are resources for IETF 124. Yes, Wes, you can still take minutes even if you're not here. And please be aware of all these. Finally, I'm Glenn Dean, co-chair for ADD, and
Sale.
My other co-chair. Eric is our esteemed and much beloved area director. So we have a short but good agenda for today. We have a working group document to highlight that is a working group adopted status, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And we have 2 new IDs have been submitted that will be presented today. Oh, do we have any bashes to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll take it. So we have a working group draft in flight that John Todd and Tommy Pauly and who else? Oh, Corey are the editors for. Tommy, did I say Tommy Pauly? Yep. My bad. It's Tommy Jensen. My bad. Tommy Pauly and Tommy Jensen have both been very great contributors to this group, and my apologies to both for conflating them. But in all seriousness, this is a working group draft, so it's owned by the working group. The editors have not made any updates in 6 months, and so it has now entered expired status. So I think it's fair to ask the question to both the editors and the group, what do you want to do? You want to keep going, or what do we want to do?
Objection. The draft is not expired.
How long ago?
Yesterday. Thousands of seconds. Many tens of thousands of seconds. So just as a quick update, we went through, there's really one outstanding bit that we need to do, which is add the example suggested by Tommy Jensen. I mean, the other one. And the reason that has not been done yet is that we're still working through an implementation of all of the edge cases, because after our last discussion, it's pretty clear that, you know, things like what happens during chain redirects, what happens when you're presented incorrectly with sets of features in the destination server that weren't apparently supported or weren't obviously supported by the client from the previous server. We want to see all the non-happy paths tested before we go for a working group last call and submit that. So that's why that has not happened. You can expect that will come out for the next one, fingers crossed. One of the co-authors switched sponsors and had some interesting times from the last meeting, and so that caused some delays.
Okay, so are we looking before 125?
That's the idea.
Okay, or at 125. I'm just trying to figure out the timing. And again, I'm not trying to tell you what the right answer is. I'm just trying to understand the timing.
Sure. So it entirely depends on how my coding in December goes is the real answer, but hopefully before.
Okay. Do you need any input, resources, or help from other parts of the working group?
We welcome anyone who wants to help us implement so that we can test other implementations. Other than that, we have the feedback we need. The draft has become relatively stable, and I expect, sans some incredible discovery or some unexpected new feedback, that we could probably, this meeting could be an email relative to our draft.
Okay.
Where we do a working group last call and handle it that way.
Okay. And before we move on, any comments on any of that from anybody? I don't see anybody in the queue. Anybody in the queue? All right. Well, then moving on. Thank you, Tommy, for the update. Tommy Jensen, that is. So we have two new drafts that were submitted. They came in, if you recall, during the IETF 123 meeting. And so the action items the chairs had was to follow up with the authors. The authors have requested time on the agenda and are ready to present their drafts. So let me turn it over to the presenters, and you can present your two drafts in order. It take roughly 15 minutes per draft with Q&A if you like. So I think you have to request to have sessions like before, and I'll give it. Okay, you have control, and the slides are now showing in the room.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to me, myself. And I'm Dongjie Liu. Today I'll be presenting our draft multicast DNS-based service discovery.
If I can interrupt just a little bit, you're coming through very, very loud in the room, so you can talk a little bit softer, and I think it'll work out just fine.
Okay.
Perfect.
Multicast, is that okay? Multicast DNS-based service discovery for encrypted DNS services, also referred to as eDNS SD. And this is a joint work with my colleagues from Jina University and CNIC. First, let's start with our motivations. The encrypted DNS are widely adopted on public internet, but local networks without centralized infrastructure remain vulnerable. In many home, enterprise, and industrial settings, the DNS traffic is still sent in plain text, which exposes device activities, service dependencies, and user behavior. And the traditional discovery DHCP lacks flexibility for encrypted DNS parameters and cannot work well in infrastructure-less environment and cannot realize real-time updates. And now you might point out that RFC 9463 has already added encrypted DNS options to DHCP and RA. However, they are still infrastructure dependent and lack real-time updates, which make them very suitable for managed networks, but not suitable for IoT devices or temporary network without centralized management. And this is where our draft comes in, providing a complementary zero configuration approach. So why do we choose DNS SD? Because they provide an ideal foundation for local service discovery. First, they do not need any central server, and they can work well in isolated and offline networks, and they can update in seconds compared with DHCP sleeve-based delays, and they can have rich parameter negotiation, which with text records carrying critical details. And our solution is that we use MDNS and DNS SD to discover encrypted DNS resolvers in local networks. And we introduced 3 new service types for DOT, DOH, and DOQ. They are accompanied by rich text record parameters for configuration. And here are the 3 service types. And here is how we structure the instance name, including instance, service, and domain. And this is the example. And we use standard DNS SD resource records, PTR for service discovery and enumeration, SRV for service location, which includes priority, weight, port, and target, and so on, and text records for service parameters, which include pass, LLPN, and so on. And the discovery process is that the EDS resolver broadcasts PTR, SRV, and text records via MDNS, and the client queries services and then receives a response with the service types. And then it queries the specific instance and gets SRV and text records, and then it resolves the addresses and establish the encrypted connection. We believe this draft addresses a real gap in local network privacy and complements existing standards like RFC 9463, and we've taken all the feedback and questions everyone raised and worked them into the new 01 version. Thanks to all your input, especially downwind from Cisco. And now we'd like to ask the ADD working group that this solution makes sense. Are there any concerns or suggestions? And we'd appreciate your support to move this draft forward. Thank you for your attention. We're happy to take any questions.
Yes, we have the first question from Stuart Cheshire, please.
Hello, I'm Stuart Cheshire from Apple. Naturally, you can't say multicast DNS without summoning me to the microphone. I think this is a good idea. DNS-based service discovery is for discovering services, and you have a service that the network offers and you want to discover it. So unless there's something I'm not seeing, and we see we have people in the queue, but on the face of it, this sounds like a good idea. As you pointed out, sometimes adding options to your DHCP server or supporting new router advertisements on your routers can be difficult. So yes, this seems like a good idea. My one suggestion is, unless I'm missing something, I'm not sure that you need multicast in the title and in the document, because everything you're describing here seems like it would be equally good with unicast service discovery. So I don't think there's anything particular to tie it to multicast DNS. And if what I'm talking about is not familiar with you, I'm happy to talk to you offline. A suggestion I'll make, if you go to the dns-sd.org website, which is a terribly, terribly old website from the 1990s and looks like it, there is an example there. If you search for AirPrint, which is what Apple calls Internet Printing Protocol, you'll see some worked example of how you can just add the appropriate records to your DNS server to advertise a service. And I think that would be equally applicable here. So that's my suggestion, is to take a look at that, and we can talk more if anything is not clear.
Thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you, Stuart. I will say that I don't understand how come anything associated with Apple didn't get a skeuomorphic design all updated. Chris Box, please.
Hello. So yeah, Chris Box BT. I can't quite get my head around why would a client be interested in using an encrypted DNS service that has appeared on the local network and is announcing itself in this way? Because when we were doing DNR, so we were defining how do you discover encrypted DNS using DHCP and RA. We specifically identified that one of the advantages of doing it that way is that networks can have RA guard, and they can filter out attacks on the network of people just connecting in and sending their own announcements, and because it appears to be it's an obvious attack vector. If I join a network and I start using this service and advertising myself as an encrypted DNS resolver, and clients connect to me and they send me all their DNS queries, I've got no right to those queries, but they get sent to me. So what's the use case that means that it's in the client's interest to be able to do this?
Actually, this draft is complementary to DHCP-RA, and it works in scenarios like without a centralized infrastructure. For example, maybe a special example for temporary disaster recovery network. You cannot connect to the outside internet, and now this time you can use the DNS-SD to discover the encrypted DNS servers, or in military or isolated networks. It's also useful. And this is different from DHCP-RA. Yeah.
Okay, I'll let Stuart add.
I'm jumping in out of order, sorry for that, but I'll just quickly answer Chris's question. Separate from the broader debate of whether we want to do this, the specific thing Chris talks about, RA guard prevents rogue devices advertising RA information. Similar things are done for DHCP, that you can't run a DHCP server on your laptop if the network doesn't want you to. And in today's world, the same thing is done with the multicast DNS. If you go and sit in Starbucks and try to advertise services on your laptop, you will find that other people can't discover them for exactly this reason, that Starbucks doesn't want people masquerading as apparently official services. So I think that addresses Chris's specific concern, which is we don't want rogue things being advertised. Lorenzo's shaking his head, but I'll go and sit down now.
And for those following along remotely, that was Stuart with the follow-up there. Eric Vank, please.
So Eric Vink, no special head here. I think the reason why, the reason why Starbucks dropped the DNS SD is to reduce the multicast traffic, not to protect its customer, but I can be wrong. It's not anyway the reason why I joined the queue. I am wondering why in your draft, and I think it can be useful indeed, are you using TXT record rather than SVCB, which is used in RFC 9462, which is DDR or DNR. I always confuse the two of them.
Because it's in standard, I forgot the RFC name. Because in the standard, we use the standard DNS SD resource records. Yeah, because in DNS SD, they use the same records, including tax records. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Jensen.
Tommy Jensen, Cloudflare. It makes sense from a on-paper concept that a network ought to be able to allow the advertisement of services. My concern with encrypted DNS is that unlike something like, say, printers, where it's a user-facing concept, where there may be UI, other configuration that shows me, hey, here are the 5 options I have, DNS is something that almost every user should never know exists. It's just something that the system is going to be able to use. And so in that context, I'm not confident that, regardless of the preventative measures taken by the network, DHCP router advertisements, these are accepted mechanisms by which we say this is the network. Multicast discovery really is, by definition, things that are available here. And I think that that's a regression if we're going to talk about automated use of this information. And if we're talking about non-automated use, I'm not convinced that anyone's actually going to use it. You talked about a scenario with disaster recovery where, say, DHCP servers are simply unavailable. That may have been previously, that this would allow some stopgap connectivity. But I guess my question is, that sounds like a different scenario and scope that would probably belong elsewhere, where we say, if there used to be, because there's other things that are provided, right? Not just DNS servers, like IP address leases, that if we really want to talk about that scenario, is not a DNS problem, but something that's a network problem that DNS would then go along with.
Michel Francois.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I wanted to echo what Eric said about SVCB, especially that the other, like the RFC 9463, it uses SVCB, and more specifically SVC params. And since you're trying to do kind of accomplish kind of the same job, you do not necessarily have to use SVCB, but still may use the same kind of semantics, so that you have the same semantics brought through different transport means, right? And also, I don't have any objection about using SVCB through multicast DNS. We just don't do it yet, but we could consider that still. It's a record, so we could include it in our responses and queries. Another comment is that I read the draft pretty quickly, and I saw eDNS mentioned a lot. And maybe it's better to avoid using eDNS because there's a confusion here. eDNS is already an extension mechanism for DNS, so maybe just use encrypted DNS, which I think it's the way we do to talk about encrypted DNS. Yeah, it's longer but less ambiguous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lorenzo, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think this could be dangerous, right? So my home network, unlike Starbucks, does allow MDNS, right? And so if I invite someone to my home and they sort of give them the Wi-Fi password, now suddenly they can sniff all of my DNS queries. That seems harmful, right? So I think the draft does mention that there are sort of ways to authenticate this stuff, but all of these require some prior trust, which implies prior configuration, which is the problem that this draft is trying to solve. So I don't see how, by just effectively, you might as well broadcast this information on the air, but it doesn't mean that that anyone listening it should trust it. In fact, I think they shouldn't trust it. So in terms of ease of use and deployments where sort of you have disaster, I mean, DHCP is really easy to set up and configure. If you can't set up DHCP, you don't have IPv4 addresses. If you can't set up iRaise, you don't have IPv6. So it is sort of pretty low bar if you want to provide any sort of connectivity to any sort of encrypted DNS server to set up network configuration. So I think this is sort of unlikely to help, and also sort of has like a lot of security and privacy risks.
Tommy Pauly, please.
Tommy Pauly, Apple. I think I'm mainly going to be echoing what others have said, but hopefully there's some other details in there that can also be helpful. I think the big obvious thing here is that we have DNR and DDR that already do exist and take care of a lot of the cases. I believe that most of the cases where you already have a DNS server and you want to upgrade it to encrypted DNS should be covered modulo, certificate handling, et cetera, and fun things we talk about. And so for getting it from another source, I think the fundamental thing to think about is the trust of, like, why would you ever trust using this? Absolutely, like the mechanism for discovering it, cool, works on paper, but how do you trust it? Maybe to the other Tommy's point, like if you had like a UI to pick it, like that would be kind of like the only way to do it. But how would the user even evaluate the trust of what what should they use, like a printer. And I think we would need a very clear demand and use case to understand when that's okay. For context, in DDR and DNR, there was a lot of effort at the beginning of the working group to really make sure that these encrypted DNS servers were indeed designated by the network or by the resolver provisioned by the network as the right one to use or the equivalent one to use. And that's something that like, I'm not sure it's like in scope to kind of go beyond that at this point. I think if we're looking at the case like emergency backup, realistically, if you had some scenario where you couldn't get DHCP working, which I think hopefully you could, if since doing any of this would require client modifications anyway, it's probably more practical that the clients would have just a list of public DNS resolution infrastructure that they could jump to as a backup, rather than relying on something like this that they wouldn't otherwise know how to trust. And getting into the spelling, people brought up before the text record bit. I agree that we would want to reuse the encoding that we have for SVCB for things rather than find another way to put them into text record parameters. And there is a draft that Gautam over here had written up that was in DNSSD talking about just, it's informational, just saying like, here's how SVCB can be sent as part of your set of things in DNSSD. So I've, to the earlier point of DNSSD normally uses SRV and text, that is true, but there's no reason it can't also, in addition to the AN Quad A records, send SVCB. And so I think if we did have the spelling, it should use that.
Jim Reed.
Jim Reed. It's an interesting draft, but I find it rather confusing because it's not really clear to me what the problem is you're trying to solve. I think the use cases need to be clarified, and I think Tommy has already made that point too just a few minutes ago. So I think further work is needed. What is the problem you're really trying to solve here and how you're trying to go about it? And I'm also a little bit surprised that you're still trying to use text records as part of the solution. I think we should try to get away from that because text records get grossly abused for all sorts of things. And when you've got a bunch of text of records in a zone, figuring out which is the particular resource record is the one that you are particularly interested in amongst all the other garbage that's in there can be quite difficult. Why not use a dedicated resource record type? But to me, it sounds like SVCP will already solve this. So I don't understand why that needs to be done. I'm not asking you to answer these questions right now, but it's maybe something to think about for a future version of the draft. Thanks.
Okay, that seems to be the end of our queue of comments for that particular draft. Would you like to move on to your second draft now, please?
Yeah.
One second. Should we get a sense of the room as far as whether there's interest in uptake? I mean, we're going to have to decide on the list, but we have a whole bunch of people here and the list is...
We could. I mean, I'll share my read and then you can share your read. My read is that the author had a bunch of very good comments and that the next step would be for them to incorporate their comments in and submit a second revision of the draft, and then we can take it from there on the list. So, author, take in the comments, make your update, and submit it to the data tracker when you're done, and let the list know so we can discuss from there. Tommy, you're giving me a look. You have a different view.
Tommy Polyevo. I mean, just in the interest of not creating too much work, because I think there's an aspect of you could go in and try to update mechanisms and references, but I think it would be good to establish the motivations and scopes and have alignment on that, because I haven't heard a clear understanding from anyone at the mic line of yes, we see the motivations and we need to do it. And so I think having discussion maybe outside of just updating a document and coming back again next time and doing the same discussion, we should have more of a focused discussion, be it on the email list or anything, of what is the motivation behind this.
Okay.
And if there is a motivation that is not satisfiable by the current mechanisms defined in the working group, then we should understand that and consider, is a DNSSD approach the right approach, or is some other mechanism the right approach? But just updating how it works over DNSSD without understanding the motivation for doing so and having consensus on that is not necessarily something that we should, I think, spend too much more working group time on.
That's entirely reasonable, although I do think it's fair to give the authors a chance. They've heard some comments on the motivations question, so I think it's fair to give the authors a chance to sort of take that in and respond back. So authors, it sounds like the dual suggestions here is one, when you've had a chance to process this comment set that you've received, that I think we want to have a conversation on the list about the motivations behind the need for the draft. And also to incorporate the updates into your draft for at least one more revision, so that we can then see if this is a direction the group wants to continue in or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, let's move on to your second draft, and we'll follow the same format. You present, and we'll discuss.
Okay.
And I'll let you know when they're on the screen here.
Why still the first slide?
Yeah, it's still not up yet. No, I've given over control. That got this far. Okay. Oh, it's on.
It's still the same slides.
Okay. Try taking that back. I can present. I could manage the slides in the room if you prefer.
Can I request screen share?
Here, I will pull up the. I'm wondering, you had sent in a couple different slide decks. One's a revision.
Yeah, the latest one. The latest one.
I'm going to put something on the screen, and you tell me if it's the latest one you wanted. Is that the one you wanted?
Actually, they look the same for the first page. Yeah.
Okay, this is the next slide.
Oh yeah, this is the correct one.
This is the correct one?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll control in here, and you just tell me when you want it. Just say next slide, please, and I'll move it to the next slide.
Okay. Let's start with the motivations first. PPP and PPPoE remain widely used, especially in broadband access. Actually, PPPoE is the protocol that brings a huge portion of the global population online. And traditional PPP-IPCP in RFC 1877 only supports plain text, which exposes DNS queries to surveillance and manipulation. And nowadays, encrypted DNS are becoming essential for privacy and security, but there is no existing standard for encrypted DNS in PPP. So clearly there is a gap there, and our goal is to fill that gap to integrate encrypted DNS negotiation into PPP. Next slide, please. Our solution is that we introduced 3 new IPCP configuration options, type 133 for primary encrypted DNS server, and type 134 for secondary encrypted DNS server, and type 135 for DNS encryption parameters. And they support DOT, DOH, and DOQ, and enable negotiation of advanced parameters like ALPN and DOH path. And they are backward compatible with RFC 1877 plain text DNS options. Next slide, please. And here is the example for type 133. And it includes protocol type, ADN length, port number, and some optional additional parameters. Next slide, please. And type 135 for DNS encryption parameter option, including server selector, param type, parameter value, and length. And for server selector, for example, hex 00 means that parameters apply to the primary encrypted DNS server, and hex 01 means that parameters apply to the secondary encrypted DNS server. And for param type, hex 01 refers to ALPN protocols, and hex 02 refers to DOH path template. Next slide, please. And the negotiation process is that the client may include option 133, 134, and 135 in configure requests. If the server supports for encrypted DNS, it responds with configure ACK for valid request, and configure NACK with a valid configuration for invalid or empty request. If it doesn't support for encrypted DNS, it responds with configure reject. And for option 135, if it fully supports the request, it responds with configure ACK. And if it partially supports the request, it responds with configure NACK with supported parameters. If it does not support it, it responds with configure reject. And the client should prefer encrypted DNS, and the client may fall back to plain text DNS if encrypted connection fails. Now, next slide, please. Here are two examples. One is basic DOT configuration. The client sends ADN length 0, and then the server responds with configure NACK, providing the ADN and port number. And the second example is that DOH with custom path, the client sends option 135 with the DOH path, and the server responds with configure ACK with the same path. Yeah, next slide, please. We believe this proposal addresses a real need in PvP deployments and bridges a security gap for encrypted DNS. We'd like to ask that is that a topic the ADD working group is interested in, that the solution makes sense? We are open to feedback and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, the queue is open, and the first person is Tommy Jensen, who's freshly off rebooting a CDN farm.
This is recorded. Be nice to me. Be nice to me. Tommy Jensen. So there's something I didn't see addressed in the presentation that I found in the draft that concerns me about the scenario. In section 1, in the introduction, it says that part of the reason to extend PPP IPCP to allow negotiation of encrypted DNS servers is to quote, ISPs can enforce authenticated DNS resolvers and prevent bypassing. Is a scenario here to prevent clients from using encrypted DNS servers that aren't provided by this mechanism?
So which part? I'm looking for the draft just now.
Certainly. So in the introduction, there's 2 bulleted lists. In the second bulleted list, right before section 1.1, it says this document extends, etc., and then lists as reason to enable secure DNS by default, operator managed trust, and backward compatibility. And the bullet for operator managed trust explicitly states that this will enable ISPs to prevent the use of encrypted DNS servers that they did not advertise. I just want to confirm, is that a goal?
This is a good question. I'm not very sure. My colleagues, anyone can give a reply?
This is also, and I think that is one of the goals of that draft.
Okay, thank you for confirming. I just want to say on the record that I vehemently disagree with that goal. Part of the reason that we've done a lot of work in encrypted DNS is to enable the user to have control over where their DNS queries go. So I have a fundamental objection to this draft. Thank you.
Tommy Pauly.
Tommy Pauly, Apple. While I agree with the other Tommy that I don't think we should have a goal in here to be like stop clients from talking to other encrypted DNS servers. I also don't think that just having another way to discover a network provisioned encrypted DNS server does anything to prevent that. I think like if we've defined lots of things in IPsec and in this working group that allowed just like upgrading to encrypted DNS. So I don't think that having the PPP layer be able to discover DNS achieves that goal, even if we don't agree with the goal.
100%. I'm not opposed to adding the technical ability to advertise because, like you said, we have a bunch. Motivations need to change.
My other comment would be just about venue, because I think mainly the work here would be about defining the right PPP mechanisms or frames to carry the things that ADD Discovery normally does. This is similar to what Ike v2 has done. That work was done in IPsec because that mainly requires the expertise of people who know IPsec. I imagine this mainly, like to review it meaningfully, it is a collaborative thing. You need two communities. You need people who understand the encrypted DNS parameters, but those are pretty standard at this point. The main thing here is we need someone who understands the PPP part. So I wonder what is the venue for that? What is the community there? So it's a bit older.
So to summarize, what you're sort of suggesting is maybe it belongs over in the other group, and then it would be like group? DNS director to do a review.
Yes, right. But like I don't know, like what group would that be, or is that like defaulting to int area or something?
Eric Vink, I joined the queue to reply to you and answer which venue, but you just reply int area.
Okay, that's fine. Tobias.
Tobias Wiebig, Max Planck Institute for Informatics. I would like to echo Tommy Jensen's concerns. And I'm also not necessarily sure whether the claimed ability could actually be technically enforced as well.
Lorenzo.
Is there a reason why the IPv6 configuration doesn't use the same array options that sort of we define for DNR? Because that, it seems like you could just send, like you send an array over the PPP channel and you get it. So for IPv4, I mean, I guess there's no such thing, but for IPv6, it seems like the better way to do it.
Actually, just last night, we are considering adding, maybe adding a section talking about IPv6. Yeah. And to reply to the comments just now, actually, why we raise these two drafts, the idea is that eDNS SD is for local network without a central infrastructure. And PPP-IPCP is applicable to access networks with a central authentication. And with the DNR, the combination of the three can cover the full chain encrypted DNS configuration from access to local service discovery, and which may cover the mainstream scenarios to fully automatic encrypted DNS acquisition. That's the idea why we raised these two drafts. Yeah.
Jim Reed, use the queue.
Yeah, Jim Reed. Sorry about that, David. Yeah, just giving this case a shameless plug for the DNS Directorate. I think it might be better to take this document and perhaps also the earlier one and chuck them over the wall to the DNS Directorate for an early review. So while we're still trying to figure out how to progress these documents and which working group in the IETF is best placed to do that work, get some sort of DNS input from that in an early stage, because at some point these documents will come to the DNS Directorate anyway, so you might as well do it sooner rather than later. Thanks.
So let me be clear, Jim. So you're suggesting using the DNS Directorate serve as a DNS dispatch?
No, not at all. I'm suggesting that the DNS Directorate do some kind of technical review of the documents about the DNS contents, not make a decision about where it's going to go.
Okay,
That's for somebody else to decide.
All right, that's what I was clarifying. And
our note taker has popped up.
Yeah, sorry,
Wes, please.
taking notes, didn't have a chance to click the button.
You
I
are.
actually don't think that's a good.
You are.
Wes Hardiker, I apologize. I actually don't think that's a good idea because the directorates are already overloaded in reviewing official documents that are coming out of working groups, and I'm not sure that we should throw personal non-accepted documents at them as an extra workload.
Florian.
Florian Opser, DNS Directorate Reviewer. I'm not entirely sure if there's actually a process to toss it to DNS there if it's not an adopted draft, but never mind. I'm wondering if the DNS Directorate chairs are also doing reviews and if they just volunteered.
may I point out that we are not a DNS Directorate session meeting, and so maybe having that discussion isn't appropriate here.
Okay, thank you, Glenn, but I'll just respond to that comment wearing my DNS Directorate co-chair hat. The DNS Directorate co-chairs do review the documents just like everybody else does. Everybody in the Directorate gets treated equally, and we round robin between all of the documents that get considered. And if necessary, and nobody else is at the front of the queue, I would be willing to review these documents if and when they arrived at the DNS Directorate. So there, nah.
I am curious to see if the automatic transcription got the na-na-na-na-nas wrong. Right.
Tommy Jensen, please.
Tommy Jensen. To be clear, I do think the second draft belongs here. The technical mechanism itself seems reasonable, and having, if there's any mechanism by which we coordinate network configuration for a host, it makes sense that it should be able to advertise encrypted DNS. No problem. My concern is that as written, the motivations will guide implementation design in an incorrect direction. Meaning that with the existing motivation of allowing ISP control, that we will end up trying to meet that requirement. If this is as simple as allowing the communication of encrypted DNS servers without that motivation, I would support doing that here in this working group unless we decide that there's a different working group for that specific technical mechanism. I don't want to punt that one. I think it does go here. The goals of the draft don't seem to align with the IETF's general goals.
And with that, we're done with the queue.
So I'm going to try to summarize the advice then to the author. It sounds like we've got some substantial comments that were made. They're captured in the notes in the transcript. And we have questions around the motivation. This one seems to be like an update versus bring it back to the list and discuss like the prior draft. So I'm guessing that the next step would be for the authors to, if they're interested, incorporate the changes as discussed, and then please submit to the list so that people are aware that updates have been made, and we will see what kind of activity we have on the list. Does that seem reasonable to everybody? Okay.
One comment, and this is also of the these two drafts, and thank you very much for the comments from the guys here. and we hope people can read the draft and give us the comment, especially you mentioned the scenarios and use cases, and we can update and to describe the scenarios and use cases more clearly in the next version of the draft. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item. Stop those slides. Back to our agenda. So that is the program for today, with the exception of the wrap up. Eric, do you have any comments? You often, as our esteemed area director, have some comments you would like to share with us?
So just quickly, I was kind of with the chair planning to close this working group once the redirected encrypted DNS server redirection is being completed. That's slowly on the way, but looks like we may have more work coming, which is, of course, those new piece of work are welcome. So the group will be at least open for at least 2 meetings, I think.
Okay, I mean, we have a pretty good turnout for a group that seems to be finishing up its work. So it seems like there's interest still. So, all right. Well, that's it. The plenary, I guess, or do we have a session between now and the plenary? So there's another session, and we'll decom, and we'll see you in the plenary. But this is ADD. You have one final comment, Tommy?
I was in queue.
Oh, my apologies. Did not see that. I thought we were done.
No,
So,
just
go ahead,
Tommy Polly Apple. I'm just thinking for the working group lifetime, because I was also like, yeah, it seems like we're kind of wrapping up. To me, it would seem kind of like mainly, if anything, it's the PPP case that probably remains in scope. I think I could very well see that also being in scope in something broad like Interia. I would imagine if that is here, then we do need expertise from people who know PPP, which is fine. But I guess I would ask our chairs and area director, if we are staying open for longer, what do we imagine that's like? Like, is it getting a bit sleepier? Like, do we need the meetings? Because, like, for example, if it's just like, let's iron out the details of the format in this PPP thing that we mainly don't know about. Otherwise, that feels like something we could do mainly on the lists. Avoid, meetings in the main agenda schedule if possible. Or we just say, I think this is a question going forward, because we're always going to have some new provisioning mechanism that's going to want to send DNS information. So there's always going to be some flavor of, we need encrypted DNS configuration over foo. And as we close a working group, and I think it's a very successful group that achieved its goals, and that's wonderful. It's also good to think of, like, what is the home and process for when people, like, if in 18 months after the working group closes, someone comes along with, I need to get the provisioning over blah, where is the home for that we want to recommend? And then potentially, could we just use that home for this work?
Before Eric responds, Tommy, let me just add from the chair's perspective to remind you that we do still have outstanding work that we have paused, awaiting the certificate on provisioning on CPE devices. That that may never trigger. They may never figure out. But if they do figure it out, we did have documents in queue that people wanted to proceed with on that when that's resolved.
So, Eric, and to reply to you, Tommy, that's a good question. I intend first shot to keep the working group open, and of course, working group last call for adoption will be done with Interia. That's where, if there are any survivor of the PPP negotiation, they should be there. And this group knows about SVCB and the like, which is not the case in Interia. So,
thank you, Lorenzo, please.
Okay, when I put up my hand, there was like nobody else in the queue. So please tell me that please feel free to tell me if this is off topic, but does anyone use DDR in production? Because we're looking at so we're looking at some metrics, and it seems like the SVCB records don't really survive very well in the wild. Yes. So we had this hack where we would hard code some IP addresses if the user put in some well-known DNS servers, and when we moved to DDR, this sort of like some of the encrypted DNS traffic just vanished. So that makes me think that maybe some networks just don't pass this VCB record, or does anyone? Okay, bleach it. Okay, yeah. So there's some of that. Do you have any guidance there? What should we be doing? Again, feel free to tell me this is off topic or write a draft.
So you're suggesting that ADD should go to ops now?
Well, we created a solution to a problem, and it sometimes doesn't work. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it doesn't belong here. We're like, oh, we just wrote it. Yeah. Hey, if anyone has some useful responses, also feel free to. Yeah.
Well, so I will remind folks that I think we have in our charter a document which nobody really was interested as we were thinking of closing up in pursuing, which was sort of an operations document, which, right? So your point that you bring up is interesting, that would sort of fall into that document. But at the time when we last brought it up, which I think may have been Brisbane, nobody from the group felt that they really wanted to take up that document and actually develop it. I don't know if that offers a pathway forward, but it is in our charter to do that document.
So expanding on this whole "what is our charter anyway" question, the first draft, it makes sense that it could be here. I could also see it going to DNSSD, and I realized I don't know where that line is, and I'm wondering, chairs and AD, what the difference is and what we'd want to do with that draft if we decide we like the revision.
Eric has decided.
So another Tommy and another Eric to reply to your questions there. Again, a little bit too early maybe, but if we have two drafts, the PPP and the DNSSD, I think it's better to make them here. Again, we got the knowledge about what encrypted DNS discovery is, and DNSSD people are there, right? As far as I know, the master and the submaster are there. IPCP, there's a different story. So don't focus too much on which working group it is, on in which area, as long as the job is done. That's basically my mantra.
Wes is
and
coming.
we can combine meetings, right? For a long time, there's been combined meeting with the DNSSD and others.
Wes Herdeker. So this is exactly, Med asked me to collect feedback this week and through the end of November about how in the world to organize DNS working groups and work within the IETF. I'm very neutral. I actually don't care at all. So he stuck me with it. That's what happens when you're neutral. So find me this week if you have thoughts about where DNS work should get done. Do we need lots of small working groups? Do we need some big ones? These meta questions of how long do we keep a working group open after it had a narrow focus in the beginning is sort of the exact kind of thing that has triggered sort of the discussion that I'm surrounding. So I'm collecting feedback, and we will sort of summarize it all at some point and give it to the ASG for consideration. I don't make decisions. I only pass on information that I've collected with some possible suggestions based on consensus. So working groups like to live forever. Sometimes working groups like to die. We'll see how it goes. But if you actually have strong thoughts on this, write me, or there's a mailing list for it and things like that. Go look, and I think there was an announcement sent to this list a while back. So.
And I'll comment for the chairs. I think that we're happy with whatever the outcome is, keep alive or not. We're neutral. So you guys vote.
Want to help?
No.
I'll be there.
Tommy
do.
Polly,
It's
Apple.
in the towel.
We like the hum.
I got up here just to respond to what Lorenzo was saying about that. So yes, I mean, I think I'm aware that there is some bleaching of SVCB. I don't think it's terribly rampant, but there's it's definitely out there. I'm not convinced that that would be the right thing for this venue, because I believe from things I've seen, there's bleaching of SVCB well before DDR was finalized. and standardized. So I don't think that is always the motivation. It may be part of the motivation to say we don't want to see that type of upgrade, but I think it's because they're trying to block other things being discovered over SVCB. Something in DNS op would be very interesting there. MapRG, like was mentioned in the chat. It's also relevant for the happy eyeballs discussion because we're talking about, when do clients, do they wait for SVCB and what happens if it doesn't come back? And it actually is very, very relevant there of what are the heuristics, and potentially means that for implementations that are willing to hard code their upgrade to encrypted DNS servers or have other heuristics about remembering previous SVCB responses, they may want to continue doing that because bleaching does exist. But I don't know if that belongs in ADD type of ops thing because it is a broader SVCB ops question.
So I can see the bleaching being a broader question, but let me ask you this question. If the bleaching is rampant and interfering with operations, does that mean that this group should be working on an alternate approach to SVCB for that discovery path? If it turns out operationally it's not viable, just because of bleaching. I don't know how big the problem is. The first I've heard of it.
So, I mean, I think within cases where the network is intending to help you get encrypted DNS, like DNR, that is okay. And you'd imagine also if a network didn't support DNR, but it was the one who provisioned you the DNS server that you can use DDR with, it also has a good incentive not to bleach it. For cases where the local network is being oppositional to you using a DNS server that it did not pick, I think that is beyond anything we can solve here or talk about operationally, and even trying to circumvent that is an interesting question.
No, but in the use case where records are blocked, maybe overblocked because they're trying to selectively block some discovery, but they're not actually trying to block the DNS discovery, but it's getting overblocked by mistake.
Yeah.
Does that mean operationally we might have work in the future as an alternate approach? I'm just asking the question, especially given that you're one of the experts and the authors of those prior works.
It's a good discussion. Maybe we should have a thread on it. I would lean towards saying that probably the way around it, if the thing that you're getting to was not provisioned by the network, it's like someone typed in quad 8 or quad 1 on the device, and that's the thing that's being bleached. There are techniques which are a bit in scope for happy eyeballs of do you remember previous results from this resolver and optimistically use them? It's like the optimistic DNS approach, which applies to potentially any SVCB content beyond just the DNS resolution bit. So maybe, but it's a great question.
I would also like to point out we are now eating into everyone's break time, so Eric has the last word.
Yeah. So quickly, my only point is that we are thinking about something like SVCB bleaching, which may exist, may not exist. I would strongly suggest that we measure first. No head.
Thank you to Wes for your note-taking expertise. We appreciate it greatly. And yeah, thanks everyone for attending.
We're done. Thank you, everybody. See you at the next IETF.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You know what nice change they've made? I will give them credit. When you exit out of the session, it
goes right
returns you back to the agenda. That is so nice.
Well, it redirects you to the agenda because I did